the story of the transfiguration, which is always the scripture that's read the Sunday before the beginning of Lent. So I invite you to listen to the Word of God as it comes to us from the 9th chapter of the Gospel of Mark, beginning with the 2nd verse. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And Jesus was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Pray with me. O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, you who are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. In our time, we are suspicious of miracles. We have our doubts. Some would say there are none, some have more faith, but when you come into this scripture in particular, we have to ask the question, what really happened here? What really happened? Did it happen exactly as it's written? Face value? That the face of Jesus was dazzling white? Was this overkill of bleach, borax, and brighteners? Or was it something else? Did a miracle happen? Did it happen or not? Someone I hope to meet when time ends and eternity begins is a Coptic monk, an Egyptian monk from, I think, the 6th century, hundreds of years ago, who wrote about this story. And I read about this 30 years ago, right at the beginning of my ministry. And he was asking the same question, actually. Sometimes we think we moderns are the only ones who ask these questions, but people have been asking them for centuries. He asked himself, did a miracle happen? Did a miracle happen? And the monk said, unequivocally, yes, a miracle happened. But the miracle is not, he said, what most people think it to be. Did Jesus shine with an unearthly light? Of course he did. The monk says, of course he did. You take that for granted because Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. The light that first shone from a manger in Bethlehem, the light that shone from the cross, the light that shone from an empty tomb on resurrection morning, of course Jesus shone with an unearthly light. But the miracle is that the disciples saw it. They saw Jesus as he really is for the first time. That's the miracle, said this Egyptian monk centuries and centuries ago. And the last thing the monk said is that when those 3 disciples came down the mountain after the transfiguration, they would never see anything the same way again. Now, the man who wrote the article that I read, Bruce Rigdon, who was a teacher at McCormick Seminary in Chicago, he wrote this. He said that the 3 disciples, the rest of their lives, they were discovering that the world was in fact totally different than they believed it to be. And what made this enormous, transfiguring difference was Jesus, the light of the world. So the transfiguration, really, he says, is not the transfiguration of Jesus. It's the transfiguration of his 3 sleepy friends. Now, if you're paying any attention to this This is a rather amazing take on the story. It completely flips it around, and I think it opens our eyes. It opens our eyes to the fact that the world is not as we usually see it to be. There's much more to the world than what we normally see, than what we're normally paying attention to. The world is, in fact, an incredibly mysterious, lively place. But most of the time, we're looking in another direction. Like the first time we city dwellers ever went in the country and really saw the stars. I mean, do you remember the first time you really saw stars? It was like somebody opened the window. Or maybe the first time as a kid you looked through a microscope in school at a butterfly wing, incredibly intricate details. Or at a piece of dirt and saw all the life that is teeming inside a piece of dirt. You saw the world in a totally different way. When you see the light, everything is transfigured. How about when you first looked at your son or your daughter and realized that they weren't yours? That they were given to you for a time. But they're not yours. They have their own life to live. They have their own destiny. And when you realize that, you just can't look at them in quite the same way ever again, hard as that may be. Or how about when you take the bite of a red, delicious apple? One of the really good ones, not one of the gnarly ones. One of the really good ones, and you go, I think I understand why Adam and Eve had that little issue in the garden. It just might have been worth it for that one bite. Or when you've lost your beloved, whether it's your mother, your husband, your wife, your friend, and you have that ache that just will not go away. It won't go away. And then you realize you don't want it to go away. You don't want that ache to disappear because that ache is the sign of the love that continues to hold you close. And you don't ever want to not feel that. I remember snow. I remember shoveling snow. I remember being tired of shoveling snow. But I also remember one day, it would happen every year really, but it would happen about the end of February or March, and I would be sick and tired of shoveling snow. And I would be out one more night for the 11th or the 14th time, shoveling the driveway. And it's totally quiet. And the snow is still falling, snow on snow, white on white. And I would think, in the midst of my complaining to myself about why I have to do this again, I would think, you know, Greg, the day will come when you would give anything to shovel snow one more time. Whether it's shoveling snow, or weeding a garden, or any one of a number of things that we sort of dislike doing, we'd rather not do. For most of those things, not all of them, but for many of them, the day will come when we'd give anything to do it just one more time. You're watching the news and you see the boy in Afghanistan who's playing something like soccer with our servicemen over there. They're using something like a ball, kicking it around. You maybe see a photograph of some girl that we're helping through the Los Niños, the little ones, through the orphanages in Mexico, is maybe reading the first book she's ever had. Maybe you see a kid in your child's class who you can tell, you know, desperately needs something that money cannot buy. And you think, they're all our children. They're all our children. And you can't look at anybody's kid quite the same way ever again. What that monk was saying when he was encouraging his readers to see the light, to be transfigured themselves was that all the world is holy ground. All the world is holy ground. If we see the light, if we open our eyes to see it. This Wednesday we'll be taking communion, the bread and the wine that are the signs of the bread of life, the cup of salvation. We say in the church the sacraments are the visible signs of an invisible grace. And it's true, the bread and the cup are exactly that. But anything can be a sacrament. Anything can be a sign of the grace of God if we have the eyes to see it. Open your eyes. Pray with me. Gracious God, the light that first shone when you created the world, the light that shone from a manger in Bethlehem and then from an empty tomb in Jerusalem, that light still shines. It shines within us, and among us, and around us, and between us. So open our eyes to that dazzling light that reveals your grace. We pray in Christ's name, for Christ's sake, for the world's sake, and for our own sakes.